Hello everyone, this is your host Nourish Khan and we are back with another video on the striker's end. And this video is going to be a very special one because we are joined by a very important and special personality out here. So we are joined by Andrew Menczel and he's better known as Manners. The, he's the host of Cricket Unfiltered and founder of Piccolo Podcast, a leading Australian production company. He's been a consistent voice in cricket media for over 10 years. Cricket Unfiltered is available on all podcast apps and YouTube. Well, Manners, if that is what you would like me to call you.
Absolutely. My friends and enemies call me Manners.
Sure. So let's take it with Manners out here. Why don't you go, with such a wonderful introduction and with such an impressive portfolio out there? Why don't you go ahead and introduce your platform and what you're doing so our viewers know a bit about it too?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on your show. Yeah, I started my first cricket podcast back in 2013, so over 12 years ago, and it was the first regular cricket podcast in Australia. And then that started as the Australian Cricket Podcast and is now called Cricket Unfiltered, and it's available on all podcast apps and YouTube. We do at least one episode a week, but usually more, depending on how much Cricket Australia is playing at the time. And also, I own a podcast production company with a studio in Sydney called Piccolo Podcasts, and I make a whole range of podcasts from finance to true crime to academic type podcasts. So yeah, I love podcasts, and starting a podcast changed my life in lots of ways, and led me to become a cricket commentator and commentate on Sheffield
Mhm.
Shield and domestic cricket. So it's been a fantastic journey.
That is absolutely impressive out there, and I hope we can, especially I've been through your channel and I've seen the content that you post, and I must say it, I've been absolutely impressed, and that is what one of the many reasons that compelled me to approach you for this podcast out there. So I'm utterly grateful to you for giving me your precious time for out for this channel, because I'm pretty sure that with this podcast our audience are gonna learn something new and it's gonna be a fruitful discussion.
Look, I'm really excited. This is the first cricket podcast based out of Pakistan that I've ever been on. I've been on quite a few other podcasts around the world, but never one out of Pakistan. So I'm very excited.
I'm excited too. I mean, in you should definitely visit our country as well. Whenever you do, just do let me know. I would love to host you out there.
Yeah, I would love to come and visit one day.
Yeah, sure. So, manners, they definitely do. Whenever you do come, to let us know, and I would definitely love to host you, because we as Pakistanis are known for our hospitality out there.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So, Manners, you know that the World Test Championship just concluded, and we saw how South Africa, clinched that victory against Australia by 5 wickets. Even though it seemed like Australia was on top for for a good 2 days of the Test cricket. I mean, considering it was Lords and the conditions kind of did not go in favor of Australia. First of all, what do you have to say about the outcomes of the World Test Championship final out there?
Well, obviously, very disappointing for Australian fans. This Australian team has been one of the most, probably the most consistent test side for the last 4 years. And it would have been a great way for them to cap off the last 2 years with a World Test Championship. But on the other hand, this is a fantastic moment for world cricket and more particularly South African cricket. They've never been world champions before in any format of cricket. South Africa, the
Hmm.
most notable chokers. And then you add to that, the struggles they have with their domestic cricket, the financial struggles, having to forego their own domestic test summer for the financial health of the game. The game is really struggling there, and I can only imagine this will be a huge boost for Cricket South Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way we saw that they were, kind of in the first innings, they were I'm talking about South Africa here. They were, I mean, Australia was on top with everything up until the first innings, and we saw how South Africa, they kind of Australia kind of restricted South Africa to a score in the 130s, and then kind of they managed to somehow, get that victory against Australia, even though the odds were not in in their favor. So, what do you have to say about the pitch conditions and how much they helped South Africa towards?
Yeah, interesting. you talk about the first innings and the second day, and Pat Cummins after the game did speak about how Australia let South Africa off the hook. How Australia let South Africa off the hook, that they had them, really at a perilous situation where Australia got a big first innings lead, and they could have scored, maybe if Australia scored 300 in the second innings, it would have been out of reach for Australia. But conditions really did change from day 2 and 3. The pitch slowed down a little bit, but also the cloud cover disappeared, and it became pretty good batting conditions. So Australia needed to survive and maybe graft a little harder on day 2, so they had more wickets in hand for day 3. I was really nervous when Mitchell Starc and Josh Hazlewood were putting on that big partnership at the end of the Australian second innings. I thought, geez, if Hazlewood can survive out there, then maybe the South African batters will be able to.
Yeah, I mean, but also, while we're on the topic, what do you have to say about Pat Cummins' exceptional captaincy?
uh, Pat Cummins is a good skipper. I think he does pretty well tactically. I do think Australia were really missing Steve Smith on day 3 when he went off with the broken finger, because it's been well reported and admitted by people in the team that Steve Smith does decide a lot of the on-field tactics with Pat Cummins. They're a great duo
Yeah,
because Pat Cummins is very good off the field. He's a very good ambassador for the Australian cricket team, and Steve Smith is a very good tactician on the field. And he was missing with that injured finger on day 3, and Australia really missed him. I sort of still, if I'm being honest, traditionally think that the test skipper should be a batter. I think wicket keepers should concentrate on wicket keeping. I think bowlers should
mm,
concentrate on bowling, and the skipper should be a batter because they don't have those responsibilities on the field. But that being said, Cummins has done a great job. He's grown tactically,
yeah,
but he shoulders a tremendous burden.
yeah. Also, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, Pat Cummins, we saw the decisions that he took on the field. We saw the swift and the changes in the bowling that he did. I mean, he was bringing a spinner and then a pacer and then a spinner and then a pacer, so that the momentum keeps on coming in favor of Australia. However, if you were to kind of analyze the recent World Test Championship final that came in, as a neutral, from a neutral perspective, I'm asking this question: how would you rate the pitch at Lords for the bet for the how would you rate the pitch at Lords in terms of cricket?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think it's pretty consistent with the way the pitch has been playing there over the
Yeah,
last couple of years. I did hear a lot of the local commentators talking about conditions in county cricket, that you often want to win the toss and potentially be batting second because conditions get easier to bat. So I don't think it's unusual. That is just the way the conditions are in England. And I think we saw good cricket. We saw enough in it for the fast bowlers, enough in it for the spinners. And if you got in and got your eye in as a batter, you could make some runs. So
yeah,
overall, a pretty good pitch. And I loved having the World Test Championship final in Lords, such a historic ground.
yeah.
It really did
It was
feel,
outstanding.
yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think it worked.
yeah. Also, I mean, Lords is a ground that's considered not an easy pitch to bat on. I mean, in terms of everything, Lords is definitely not an easy ground, you would say. Runs do not come easy, wickets do not come easy, and I feel like that is one reason why scoring such scoring milestones and getting five fifers and good wickets count as something that count as a major achievement out there. I think that is one reason. What what impact do you see of the crowd being there at Lords on the outcomes of the World Test Championship final?
I think the crowd was pretty pro South Africa for most of the game.
Yeah,
I think the English wanted the
yeah,
South Africans to win, and I think a lot of South African expats went there. So, look, I don't think the crowd had a big bearing on the game. Australia normally performs well at Lords. I think what was really the decisive factor was Australia's weak top order and South Africa's excellent fast bowling. Kagiso Rabada is one of the best fast bowlers of all time, and he took 9 wickets. You add to that a pretty
Yeah.
incredible spell from Ngidi on the second day where he took 3 quick wickets that opened Australia's second innings up. And they're both fast bowlers who take wickets at a low average and a low strike rate. So no surprises that they had that sort of firepower there. And yeah, unfortunately, Australia's just not good enough.
Yeah. Also, we saw that, on the third day and probably on the fourth day. In the third day, in the third session, we saw that Australian uh, Pat Cummins delivered a no ball, and then there was some fumble in the field, which is unusual of the Australian team. As you know, as whoever knows the Australian team knows that they're like on top with everything, with their fielding, with their bowling, and everything is always exceptional. So such instances are very rare to see. So and then on the fourth day, in the first session, there was pretty much the decisive session of the entire game. We saw that they took some reviews that were not necessary. So, what do you have to say about those?
Good question. I think generally Australia have taken their foot off. I don't think they practice and train as much as some other Australian teams in the past. That's not to say they're not sharp and not very good fielders, but I do think there was a little bit of an element that they were underdone for this test match. A lot of them hadn't been playing cricket. Some have been playing in the IPL. Some have been playing county cricket, but, not a
Yeah,
lot of cricket together. And as well, they don't train as hard on their fielding. It is absolutely irrefutable evidence. I've spoken to the players. It's not that they don't train; they definitely do train. But for example, under Justin Langer, they did a lot more training on their fielding. It's a lot more of a personal responsibility now in how you prepare for a test match. I had Nathan Lyon on my podcast before last season, and he was saying, it has changed within the team that a lot more of the onus is on getting yourself ready personally and making sure you're match fit and ready to go. Whereas in the past, more of a sort of unified team approach, and you would see them having a couple of really hard fielding sessions leading into a test match. They don't do that now, and I think we're seeing the effects of that. And if you look at Australia's T20 World Cup, their fielding wasn't so good. We've seen it in the past that they've haven't been as sharp in the field as other Australian teams. They're not a bad fielding
mhm.
side by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm not saying they're unfit and lazy, but they're just not quite as diligent on that stuff as other teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of fielding, we saw that South Africa was also in their at their A game, especially in this World Test Championship final. So yeah, that's a very insightful conversation that you just had, and some useful inputs that you added. Those are some interesting perspectives that can be looked at towards. So I was just going through some latest cricket news, and I came across this news that ICC is actually considering to incorporate 4-day tests in the upcoming World Test Championship finals. So what do you have to say on that? Does this WTC final that was held at Lords has anything to do with that?
Yep. Just before we move on, you mentioned the South African team. They organised a practice game against Zimbabwe for the World Test Championship. I know a
Yeah,
couple of days were rained out and they didn't get a lot of match practice, but I really liked the intention. Conversely, the Australian team was in Scotland playing golf leading into the game. So, maybe Australia should
yeah.
have been in Scotland trying to find a practice cricket match rather than playing golf. I know the English team prepares for test matches by playing golf, but I don't think the Australian team should start doing that. Like, if we're going to adopt some stuff from Bad's ball, I don't mind the aggressive batting, but I think we should stick to cricket practice and golf should just be a hobby. Um, but into your question
Yeah.
about the 4-day test matches, I think they're a really good thing because a lot of cricket boards are struggling financially. And if you can play a 4-day test and it means you can maybe play 3 test series instead of a 2 test series, I'm all for it. I wouldn't like to see big test matches be 4 days. So the Ashes, Australia v India, the big series. But, if a smaller nation, say Ireland's playing Afghanistan and they want to schedule a 4-day test, then I think it should be fine.
Yeah, but I mean, if it's a law, then it would be consistent for everything. But yeah, you're right. I mean, if we
Mm.
see, because usually, if I'm not wrong, so the next World Test Championship final would also be held at Lords, even though India had kind of appealed to the ICC that they should let India host the next three WTC finals, but ICC has officially said that they will that the next three World Test Championship finals would be held in England. So if considering the next WTC final is in Lords, then 4 day would be enough because usually, I mean, historically speaking, the third day is usually the decider in Lords.
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it. If they made it a law that all tests had to be 4 days in the World Test Championship, I don't like it. And I'm going to be protesting at the ICC. I think you need 5 day test cricket. I think especially in Australia where the wickets are a bit flat, you want that option.
Yeah,
So also with rain around and you look at the subcontinent, you need that fifth day. And I think it's really important to allow that flexibility. So, if the ICC were to say all test matches would be 4 days now, I would be disgusted. And they can't even bowl 90 overs in a day now. So what are we going to get? Four days of 70 overs? So we get a 280 over test match, which is not enough. Not enough at all.
yeah, I agree. Because I mean, if it's standard 5 day, then it should be 5 day. Because like you just mentioned, if it's teams like Ireland and such teams, then we can expect a 5 day game. And just because the WTC final was concluded in 4 days doesn't change anything. That it doesn't change the
Yeah.
fact that Test cricket cannot be concluded in 5 days. So yeah, a very insightful take on that as well. Um, we have seen that the last World Cup that Australia won, which was probably the ODI World Cup, that they won in India. After that, they've lost three consecutive ICC tournaments. So, where do you think Australia is lacking in terms of that?
Interesting. Look, I think the team has just plateaued in the last 2 years. I think that 2023 World Cup was probably the high point, winning the World Test Championship that year, then winning the World Cup later that year. I think the team reached its high point. And since then, I think the selectors have been slow to make any big generational change within the team. So it's still a team full of match winners. And that's the thing that has allowed the selectors to take this tactic. The fact that you've got Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins, Lyon,
Yeah.
Zampa, when you look at the white ball attack as well, there's so many match winners there. You add in some of the great batters we've got, Smith, Maxwell, etc., that they've been able to allow this generation to play on. But we have seen it just plateau and start to slowly decline. Obviously, Warner's retired now, so you're right.
Yeah.
And T20 World Cups, Australia just have never been good at. We've won one, but apart from that, we really struggle to even make the semi-finals in a lot of the T20 World Cups. So
Mhm.
that's still, I think, something that this Australian team has to crack. They have to work out their approach to the T20 World Cups. Maybe taking a younger, more dynamic team in there will be the way to go. But, with the test team, the top order now is in a little bit of a mess. We're going into our biggest test series, the Ashes, and we still have really no idea who the top three is. We need an opening batter and we need a number three. And the batter we do have, Usman Khawaja, is almost 39 and really struggling against fast bowling. So the selectors have been conservative. They tend to resist making big changes and they back the incumbents. But the time is now. We need to bring in this new generation. Young players like Sam Constas need to come into the team.
Yeah. I was actually coming to that question. You mentioned Sam Constas. So we saw that in this WTC final, Sam Constas was, kind of not included in the playing 11, and instead of him, the View Webster was included. So what do you have to say about that change? Because this was a change that was much talked about among the cricket fans. But we saw that
Yeah.
Webster also performed good, equally good in the WTC finals. But people were still saying that, they shouldn't have excluded Sam Constas out of the playing 11.
Yeah, well, I think look, it's a couple of things there. Firstly, I think Sam Constas was really against Marnus Labuschagne in the selection battle. So I think Bo Webster was a separate case because he was the all-rounder. I think they wanted his bowling flexibility. So if you look at it, say Constas v Labuschagne, I think Australia got themselves into trouble because we went to Sri Lanka earlier this year after the tests against India, and we didn't play Sam Constas. We played Head and Khawaja at the top. And I actually think we should have stuck with Constas in those test matches just to allow him to find his feet at test level. So then the selectors came to a situation, we've got this one-off grand final and Constas has never played in England. He hasn't played in the last test matches. Maybe we just hold him back. And so they took the very conservative selection and they held him back. And I think Australia needed an aggressive batter in the top three. Khawaja,
Yeah.
Labuschagne, and Green are all too defensive. I was actually talking about, just for that test match, maybe open with Josh Inglis, who scored a test century in Sri Lanka, and allow him to maybe try and hit the bowlers off their line, because unfortunately the South African opening bowlers did settle and they dismissed our top order pretty cheaply in both innings. So yeah, I would have liked to have seen Constance play, and I think they need to back him now. We need a counter-attacking batter at the top of the order to balance out the players around him, and
Yeah.
we need to be brave. We need to be brave, Nourish.
Yeah, no, I agree. Absolutely. So that's again a very insightful take by you, because most people, including, honestly, I would be honest, even I was not like in favor of. I mean, I was in favor of this decision that the Australian team made, but you added a very valid point out here, because I mean, we saw that in the WTC final, the Australian team really struggled with their batting lineup, and I mean, it was a bowler's game, so it kind of made sense. I mean, that pitch was difficult, and they needed someone that could step up with the bat. So yeah, you're right about that. So. Uh, Winners, moving on to the like final part of our podcast, we have England versus India coming up. The next cycle of the World Test Championship has started, in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh are already playing each other at the Gulf Cricket Stadium. And next up, we have India and England that are going to kind of face each other off. So, what do you have to say about that game?
I mean, a few things. I heard Graham Swan saying that it's a good warm up for the Ashes, which is a little insulting to India that England are maybe treating it as a warm up for the Ashes. It just shows how the Aussies are in the English heads all the time. I mean, so it's obviously a big series. I was surprised at how big the India v Australia series was here over the summer, the border Gavaskar. So many records were broken in Australia: viewing figures, crowd figures. It was huge. And I'm just wondering whether the India v England series will have similar buzz. And I think it will. I just think Indian cricket attracts so much interest. And you add to that the
Yeah,
Bazballers.
I
I
mean,
think
and
it's going to be gone.
yeah, also I think it's time that basketball, returns to the hype that it has created, because we've seen that hype kind of slowly dying down over the past few tournaments that we have seen. England has not been up to the mark.
Oh, absolutely. They've struggled. So they need to start winning some test matches. And, it's an interesting period because this Indian team is in a period of transition. They've obviously lost some big names: Sharma, Kohli, Ravi Ashwin. So it's a real change for them. So there's a bit of the unknown there, a new skipper, Shubman Gill. So how will they go in England? So it's a very intriguing series. I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, also when it's the last time India and Australia, kind of faced each other off in Australia was in the Border Gavaskar Trophy. And you saw that other than the game itself, the stump mic game was also on top. So do you see that stump mic game being kind of repeated in this series? And are we gonna get some interesting, kind of interesting vocals out of those?
Maybe. The thing is now, well, a couple of things. All the players all play together in the IPL now. So it's funny when
Yeah,
you go to a game, Australia v India, you're watching the teams warm up. And maybe not so much this year, but a lot of the time they're all talking to each other, the Australian and Indian players. They all play together. It's all very friendly. And I think as well,
yeah,
there is a fear if you're an overseas player, you don't want to piss off the Indian players too much, because then they might tell their IPL owner, oh no, don't sign that guy. I don't like him. I don't want to play with him. And all of a sudden you cost yourself a lot of money. So I'm not sure. Obviously, when in the heat of the battle, things still happen. But I think we've seen in the last couple of years, it just become a little less hostile.
yeah. And that is what I mean. That is what made the game even more interesting and made the viewers a bit more hooked to watch it. So then, thank you so much, Manners, for your insightful, thoughts. So before leaving, I would like to what one message? What is that one message that you would like to give our viewers as as you know, you uh, achieved impressive stuff in this field, and like you're yourself an aspiring journalist. And I mean, I've seen your work; it's totally impressive. So, what is that one message that you would take away message that you would like to give our viewers?
That's a really interesting question. What one takeaway message? I mean, I just love the community around cricket. Cricket is a big family, and I love it the way it brings people together from all around the world. I was telling you before I started, sorry, so I haven't been on a podcast from Pakistan before, but it's just great that cricket can bring people together from all around the world and all around the world. So yeah, and the online cricket community is a beautiful thing, and thank you so much for having me.
No, it's a pleasure for us to have you. Honestly, I'm utterly grateful to you for giving me and my channel your precious time out there. I mean, I know you're quite busy with all those podcasts aligned, and you kind of are. I know you're like kind of a VIP person out there, and you still kind of managed to give me your precious time. So thank you so much for Manners for joining us, and it was truly an insightful conversation. So this is your host Nourish Khan signing off from these strikers, and we'll see you soon in the next video.